Welcome to E360 TV, the live streaming and on-demand destination for influential voices and enlightened audiences. We offer trending, grassroots, and purpose-driven content across a diverse range of interests. E360 TV is more than just watching programs. We offer the ability to interact with live shows connecting audiences to real, authentic influencers and storytellers while streaming to millions of devices. Real experiences. Raw conversation. One destination for it all. E360 TV.
On July 4th, 1962, I found myself in the lost and found of mankind. Just because something finds its way to the lost and found doesn't mean that it wants to be there. Just because something finds its way to the lost and found doesn't mean that the person who lost it doesn't care for that lost item.
You are writing moments that people will learn from, grow from, and heal through for thousands of years. Together, we are co-authoring a unique moment in time. That DNA, those fingerprints, they're going to be gone. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. But it is your story that they will tell for thousands of years, but only if you leave it. Things that do not serve you must go. The longer you wait, the more time you give them to trick you into serving them. 22 homes in foster care, everything I wore as a scar, as a shame, things that started like Velcro on my spirit. After just a few months, then years, then decades, I had believed myself into believing that they were indelible tattoos. Sometimes we have to be broken down to appreciate the view once we start getting up. I want you to leave this place and know that you have been changed. Why? How do I know it's true? Because each of you has just changed.
Hey, welcome. How you doing? I know you guys aren't used to seeing Dr. Lauren on the weekends unless we're having a 90-minute television special. And today we have another one. We've had 3 in the last 3 weeks, so we are on a roll, and I am so excited. Never before in all 8 of the years here have I had a special that was dedicated to men and dads on how to raise the bar in so many different ways. I'm so excited to bring you this group of professionals with their unique and individual takes on fatherhood, and also very excited for Jeremy Roadruck, who has been on my show, is coming back on the show, and today he is responsible for Lead Like a King, everything you need to know on how to make magic inside your own dynamic with your father-son relationships and all of those people that sit in the front row seats. So without further ado, we're going to get started. Get ready. Share the broadcast out. Bless in the manner in which you would like to be blessed. Get your notes ready because there's a lot of nougats right around the corner. Thanks for being here. Here we go.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. I am very excited to have you here. I want to say a big thank you for this opportunity with Dr. Lauren, because we've had some really great conversations behind the scenes talking about a lot of the challenges, the pains, the plights that so many men and fathers face in the world today. And unfortunately, the advice that we're given about men being such simple, easy to manage creatures, if that were the truth, there wouldn't be all the relationship problems that are out in the world right now. If it was just as simple as feed a man and fuck a man, and those are the only two things he needs to be fat, dumb, and happy, and he'll do everything you want, I'm here to say that's not the truth. It is a much bigger conversation, and I am very excited to have this opportunity with you, with our panel of basically experts in various areas of life, love, and business. We're going to be talking about the needs, the wants, the fears, the dreams, the desires of men, and ways to get those things met that's going to help amplify for themselves as well as the people in their lives. So husbands, you want to tune in, wives, you want to tune in, and I'm very excited to have this conversation, to carve out this time, because it is such a necessary conversation, especially it's Father's Day this month. So hopefully dads will get something better than a tie again this year, or some sort of, he gets to have a meal and that's about all he gets acknowledged for. So we want to do something more than just that. So without further ado, I would like to bring on my guests in no particular order. First up, I would like to introduce Josh Tyler. He is the co-founder of the League of Savage Gentlemen, the online site where you can find amazing clothes for men. And he's got some projects going with both the League and the Legion of Savage Gentlemen. And I'd love for him to take a minute or two, introduce himself, who he is, why he wants to be here for this conversation today. And with that, take it away, please, Josh.
Hey, Jeremy, thanks for having me on. I'm always excited for any opportunity to have a conversation. Jeremy and I have known each other for several years now. We've worked together on a few projects, and I always enjoy the nuggets of wisdom that I get to take away from him. I'm a father of three, former professional fighter, turned entrepreneur. There was some school teaching days somewhere in between there, so I've got a background in that. And really, I'm just on this journey of kind of trying to figure things out for myself, and along that way, hopefully showing other men and guiding them to learn from the mistakes that I've made and the lessons, the hard-fought lessons that I've learned, and help just lend some insight and perspective. And that's kind of the thesis of our Legion events. I just came off the tail end of a 4-day horseback adventure in the mountains of Utah with a solid group of guys. And man, it was a really cool experience, and we learned a lot. And so I'm happy to just share some of those insights with you guys here.
Very cool. Well, I'm excited to have you as part of this conversation. And one thing I can say, because Josh and I have known each other for several years, he's got a fantastic community that he's built around him. But the biggest thing, whenever I advocate people should check out what Josh is doing, is the simple fact he doesn't pretend to have all the answers, and he owns his own areas of growth. And that for me speaks volumes to the character of a man, to just say, this is what my experience is, but I'm open, and maybe you've got a different take that I could learn from. And I've seen him time and time again be in that place of openness and willing to expand and grow and fight for his point of view as well, and call people on stuff as well. So it's really a joy to just kind of experience that on the receiving end as a friend, but also getting, called out on some stuff, as well as being, on the sideline watching it happen with other people, and then in live events being able to facilitate it together. Josh is one of my favorite people, and I'm really glad he was able to make the time for this. So I'm excited for today's conversation. Let me introduce, we got like 4 more people to introduce, so let's get everyone on, and then we'll start the round table. So next, thank you, Josh. I appreciate your time. We'll be right back with you. Next, let me introduce Dan Andrews. Dan is marketing and networking, just full of wisdom and insight and perspective. I met him actually through networking, and we interfaced a couple different times. And then we've had a couple of really deep dives into the nature of being a husband, being a father, being a business owner, and how to have accountability to how to grow. So Dan, I would love for you to introduce yourself, and why are you here, and why do you want to come on the session with us? I know.
Sure. Thanks for that. Professionally, just very briefly, I believe that marketing and networking are not at all the same. So other people do marketing, I build networks. There's a huge difference, and they have nothing in common if done right. But anyway, I chose to be on here today because Jeremy invited me, and my relationship with Jeremy is strong enough, because we have a true relationship and we don't just know each other superficially, that when he asked me to show up, I show up. I've had an interesting journey through my life on marriage, and also recently on fatherhood, which, if we have time to get into the fact that I got to that journey through kind of a different route, I'll be happy to share that. But anyway, anytime Jeremy's showing up, I have a lot of confidence in him. And if I can add some good to the world or some insight, as my father said, you're always an example, either a good one or a bad one. So hopefully people can learn from what I have to share today. I feel like I've gained a bit of insight in 56 years, and I'd like to share whatever it feels like it'd be in service to someone else. So thanks for having me, Jeremy.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the biggest thing I've seen with Dan, is that willingness to engage and kind of just get in the weeds and let's go. Let's make this happen. Again, it's one of those things I respect about you as a man, but you as a person, is like, it's easy for people to talk. It's easy for people to say the right things on social media. Rubber meets the road. Look at how someone lives. Look how they show up time and again. Dan's one of those guys. He walks his talk so much that it's like, what's he got going on? We need to see more of that and hear more of that as well. So again, I appreciate you being able to make the time to join us today. I'm very excited for where today's conversation is going to go. Next, I would like to bring on JD and Joseph. But JD is a friend and a client, and he has been through a couple of my programs. Also, business owner, husband, father, 2 young boys. So we have some conversations around, that communication angle, because talking to kids, talking to parents, it's a different thing. So JD, could you introduce yourself, and again, why you wanted to be on today's session beyond, you had it in your schedule?
Hey guys, like you guys have said, thanks for having me on. JD Nestor, a small woodworking and construction company. Like Jeremy said, I've got 2 young boys, and they're enough of a handful that I'm glad I've got him in my corner to ask questions to. So he's been nice enough to answer those questions. And so when he asked me, hey, do you want to do a panel? You betcha, I'll come do whatever you need me to. So other than that, it's a pretty small world that we all live in, and we're getting to know more people in it. So
absolutely. And JD and I also have been to a Savage Gentleman event in person as well. So he's a lot taller than he appears online. So however tall you think he is, add a couple more, because you're going to be like this.
I'm not that tall,
And then to round us out today, I actually invited two ladies to be on the call as well, but one of them is having some technical issues, so she might be able to join us later. She might not. We'll have to see. But I would like to bring Becky on, and I have met Becky through social networking and connections. We're in a couple different networks together, and I wanted to have a perspective of a mom and a woman who has been through, a variety of experiences with men, because it's easy for guys to sit around and say a bunch of stuff. We all have different experiences, different needs and wants. And so I wanted to have Becky on to kind of balance the conversation so that we can include more perspective. So with that being said, Becky, if you would please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Oh, hey, I'm Becky. I'm here for you. You were looking for a female voice, and so I'm like, okay, I'm game, whatever. I care deeply about the well-being of men, being the mom of a fully grown man now. Yeah, I don't know. I've been a homeschooler for many years. I've got 3 kids, and I've been through the ringer with their dad. So here I am to hopefully help other men avoid the pitfalls that their dad did.
Very nice. And that's kind of why I appreciate you being on. I know you're going through some stuff still, even at this moment. And so, yeah, I don't want to get too raw and real beyond what you're comfortable with or oversharing for this container. But, it really does matter that we as men understand also the impact of what we do and how it's sometimes perceived, because I see a lot of times couples getting locked into, but I'm not wrong. And that leads down a rabbit hole of damage simply because, but I'm not wrong. And it's like, yeah, but that doesn't mean you're right. And so, really this whole entire conversation, the place I'd like to start is really for everyone, and we can round robin it, but are men and women different? Are men just hairy women? Are women just hairless men? What do you see as like the big distinction to be made between men and women? And then we can kind of build off of that to go down this rabbit hole beyond that point. So, Josh, you were the first person I brought on. So what's your take?
Oh, man. There's obviously, to anyone with, I think, eyeballs and a brain, some distinct differences between men and women. I think we can also get really, really mired in those differences. And so that can be problematic as well. So understanding that, yes, there are differences, but also there's similarities, and acknowledging both. We tend to look at things in a very zero-sum mentality where it has to be either or. And you and I, we talk about this all the time, very much a yes and. Men have certain features, women have certain features, yes, and there's often sometimes some overlap. And this is kind of the thesis of Savage Gentleman is a man's ability to tap into both. I mean, we can say savage to represent the masculine, and we can say gentle man to represent somewhat of a feminine energy. And a lot of guys don't like to hear that. A lot of guys don't like to acknowledge this concept of feminine energy because, oh, what are you saying? I'm a chick, bro? And that's not what there's a distinction, right? There's a difference between masculine and feminine energies, however you want to conceptualize that. And then also a difference between biologically being a man and biologically being a woman. And I think with the world today, it can get kind of sticky and people kind of get lost in the sauce. And so I think it's probably more helpful to find where the common ground is and the overlaps versus trying to point out all of the differences and drive a wedge, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's really important that acknowledge, yes, there's similarities, yes, there's differences, and it's finding that space on both sides where we can come from it with a place of appreciation, because then we can expand the good stuff. We can clarify the chunky bits, but we can clarify, expand that good stuff, and it's like now we're building towards something that enriches and delights everybody involved, versus you have to fit this container that I've predefined for you. Dan, what do you think? You've had a little bit more time on this earth, so you look at men, women, just opposite versions of each other, and they should just shut up and suck it up and just fix it? Or
Oh gosh, no, I would hardly say opposite at all. I would say complementary in so many ways. I think those things are very fundamentally important. And I get that some people, some men might be, and some women might be offended if you reference a man showing feminine energy or a woman showing masculine energy. But I think we do have ways of being in the world, predominantly, right? But if I was not home and there was some threat to our household or to a member of our household or a pet, if my wife and I had one, and she only exhibited feminine energy and did nothing to protect the family member or the pet because, the masculine energy is my role, then that's not really being fully a human, right? We've all seen moms, lunge for the child that's about to fall or attack the coyote that's attacking their pet dog, right? I mean, you can catch these, if you Google those videos, there's plenty of examples of women who go through most of their day and their moment and their life exhibiting and relishing and understanding their feminine energy, still being able to provide some masculine energy when called for. And I think the same thing applies to men, right? There is a way of being in the world that is predominantly masculine. But if we never took a moment to show sympathy, if we never took a moment to care, if we never took a moment to show fear when there's fear involved, my mother says that one of her clearest memories of my dad being a dad was the fear in his eyes when I was a small child and he dropped me in the surf of the beach. He was sitting, at his waist in a wave, and a wave came and knocked me out of his arms. And just the fear that he showed in that moment drew my mom to him, because she would like to think she's attached to a guy that cares enough about his kid for fear to go through his mind when I was dropped in the surf, right? And, so there can be a huge connectivity in a man having a moment or a period or a space to be in the world in a way that's predominantly or would be more typically considered feminine, just as there's moments when women need to show up in the world, right? I mean, if I came home from work, to use the very stereotypical, thing that's been made fun of for generations, right? And all the jars were lined up on the counter and, nobody was cooking dinner because, I had to be there to unscrew every lid, right? That's ridiculous, right? I mean, my wife is smart and intelligent. And when she's had a day off, she's been known to paint walls. I mean, her office in our house is, she and my daughter painted it themselves. They changed out the side view mirror on the car door when she clipped the mailbox, or no, one of us, probably me, clipped the garage on the way out, right? And wiped out a side view mirror on her Volvo. And she bought the part and got the YouTube videos and did all this because it was during my workday and I couldn't contribute, and I appreciate that she's willing to show up and do what would be considered more of a masculine thing or show some masculine energy. I'm good with that. It's very attractive.
I like that idea that your first take is like, no, it's complementary, right? Because it's really that idea that we can enhance each other, expand each other. Like if you're in competition with your intimate partner, that's going to lead to a lot of conflict and a lot of hurt feelings and stepped on toes. That just doesn't need to happen that way. So JD, what's your take on it? Because you've got the two young boys at home. So you're seeing kind of a pure raw masculine crashing into stuff, knucklehead redirect. So what's your take?
You're right. I'm seeing that definitely, because those two, I mean, they're still learning themselves, let alone everything else out in the world. So they do whatever comes naturally. They'll just bullhead their way through whatever they can. But when it doesn't work, then we've taught them hopefully enough that they kind of revert to a softer side. And I don't know, they're trying to use that to their advantage. Kids are, they're learning how to push boundaries and see what they can come up with. And it's, I don't know, like Dan was saying, how we complement each other. So I'm glad that my wife she'll step up and take the role of masculine when I'm not there. And it doesn't work with our children for some reason. They won't listen until I show up, and then they're like, "Oh, okay, now hold on, Dad's really here. We gotta shut up and listen." So I don't know how to make that one stick with them yet, but we're figuring that out.
Yeah, that's kind of a common thing of like one parent will be more the authority figure and like there's a final line, and one parent, we can push the boundaries on this. They'll cave in at some point. So
Right.
that leads us right into Miss Becky, and looking at you've raised a son now from birth to he's a grown adult and out in the world. How does that show up for you when you think about masculine, feminine, men, women? Are we just mirrors of each other in some way? Are we the exact same and it's all just arbitrary garbage and we should all just shut up and there's only one perfect right way to do everything? So what's your take on this?
Well, having raised two of my three kids all the way to adulthood, so I've got one son and two daughters. I can most assuredly say, no, men and women are definitely different. Little boys and little girls are definitely different. But different isn't better or worse. It's just something different. From my perspective, knowing, some of the things that about me, one of my primary concerns for men that I don't share for women is the availability and the stigma around, seeking mental health care. My kid's dad he went nuts. He would not process some unresolved childhood trauma, and he turned to alcohol to numb it, and he just wouldn't face it, and he was too afraid to. He didn't want the he just wasn't comfortable processing any of that stuff with anybody, including me. And I worked really hard to make sure that my son never felt like he couldn't talk about his feelings, just like my daughters. I worked really hard to make sure that my son never was shamed for his tears as a little boy. I made sure that my son had the vocabulary to use to describe his feelings that his father did not have. So, I mean, I had to do different things, more intentional things with him than I did with my girls to make sure that happened for him and that it wasn't socialized out of him. And I think I did a pretty good job. He's my talker. He'll call and I'm like, oh, I'm not picking up the phone unless I've got 2 hours to spend on the phone with this kid. So it worked.
I think Becky brings up a great point here in that there's probably a difference between the immutable concept of masculine, feminine, and then the more malleable notion of the cultural definitions, right? And I think it's important that we sometimes draw the distinctions between those two, because when we talk about masculine and feminine energy, and you talk about, well, men should, provide this, that, and the other thing, and the women need to do this, that. I think that those are more cultural than they are just natural. Like there's an almost, for me, difficult to explain impact that masculine energy has on a child, true masculine energy versus feminine energy. And the reality is that they absolutely need both. And without that child is going to have a difficult time adjusting. And that doesn't mean, these very superficial ideas necessarily that a kid needs to know how to change his oil, if he's a boy, and if he's a girl, if she's a girl, then she has to know how to, cook dinner. Like these things, yes, they have some carryover, but I think we get so caught in the superficial definitions that we kind of miss out on the much larger, grander scale. And, some of that, maybe Jeremy, you have some insight. Some of it is really hard to put into words. It's so big and it's so powerful. You recognize it, you feel it, but to try and define it, I think can be very difficult.
Yeah, actually, to go into that, like the idea, oh, well, a person who talks a lot, oh, they must obviously be feminine. And it's like, no, not necessarily. It's the character and content of the communication, because masculine tends to be more data transfer. I'm telling you a story for a specific point for a specific reason. Masculine's a lot of what's the point, what's the problem, very tactical, what I call triangle. And feminine is more context. And I want to tell you about what I'm thinking and about what I'm feeling and where I'm at and what I'm going through and what I'm processing. And I'm going to open up and expand and make bigger whatever the thing is that's happening. And so, if you've ever been in that place of overwhelm and someone's able to come meet you in that space and they create a sense of calm and a sense of space, that's more of a masculine nature of just there's a boundary here and breathe and slow, and it's just you and me and the world disappears and there's nothing else that matters. There's nothing else that's happening. It's just us. I'm with you. That sense of calm tends to be more of a quote unquote masculine frame where you're excited and you're sharing something with someone and they're expanding it and they're adding to it and making it even bigger and it's spinning up even larger and it's even more creative and it's more explosive. That can be more of a feminine expansion of this one little seed becomes these bigger and bigger and bigger things. And so we've got like the cultural affect, right? The change the tire, the cook the food. But there's men who are master chefs and there are women who are master mechanics. It's not because you're pokey in part, pokey out part. Oh, I don't know how a wrench works because I only have pokey in parts. Like that's like childish crap, because women biologically tend to have better eye-hand coordination than men. Women tend to make better surgeons than men because of attention to detail and fine figure acuity. So there's not this is the only thing always ever. So yeah, you raised a really good point. What do you guys think on that? Like, we get into this idea of what it means to be a man. What does it mean to be a man? Like, what is your thoughts? Becky, I'd like to actually start with you and say, to me, a man is, and then what would be your basic, this is the definition. That's how I know my son's going to be a good one.
Okay. Well, I can just tell you, I guess about my kid, why I think he's a great guy. He is, I think it's Jordan Peterson that says something about weak men being really dangerous men, because they're capable of all sorts of terrible things because they won't stand up for what's right. I butchered that. But I think probably most people who know you probably know that quote of something. But my son is, he's active duty Coast Guard. And when I am in his presence, he's he is hyper aware of what's going on around him. And he carries himself very, very confidently. Like nobody's going to mess with him because he looks scary when he's not in son, friend, husband, brother mode. He looks scary. His work, his reputation is really, really important to him. He always wants to be synonymous with excellence. He's very focused and driven, and he does what needs to be done. He does dirty, dangerous, and unpleasant stuff all the time because it needs to be done. And even as a teenager, he would, do stuff for me, because his dad was circling the drain, and he'd take care of things. He took my dad's ashes from my mom when she was sobbing when we were getting ready to spread his ashes, and he did it. He didn't want to do it, but everybody else was falling apart. And so he took it and he did it. So he's got that aspect of him. And then he's got the aspect of him that, he calls his mom 2 or 3 times a week and just to check in and say, hey. He calls his sisters and checks in with them. He, dotes on his wife, and he, looks really comfortable holding babies, and he's very, very sweet in that sphere of his life. They're both, different, but the same person. And I appreciate that about him. I appreciate that when I see it in other men. I see it in my son-in-law as well. And so when I see that in other men, I really appreciate that kind of energy.
Nice. So JD, what about for you? How do you see like the man you want your sons to grow into? Like, how would you define that?
God, I just want them to be nice. I want them. I'm not going to say that women can't do the dirty, unfun stuff, but they should be. They shouldn't have to. That's in my brain. That's what a man should be doing. You know, that's one of the old sayings is that if a man gives a woman a house, she makes it a home. If he gives her food, she makes it a meal. And that's in my brain. I guess that's a kind of traditional standpoint. Not to say, like I said, that women can't provide all that stuff themselves, but they shouldn't have to. So, kind of like Becky said, we should be doing the down and dirty stuff that's dangerous because that's kind of what we're programmed for, you know. I don't know. That's kind of what I do for part of my job is the logging side. That's one of the top 10 most dangerous jobs in the world. Cool. I didn't know that until insurance called and told me that. I just thought it was fun. But I want my boys to be able to just look at it and be like, well, let's go do that, you know, because it needs done. Let's not complain about it. Let's just go get it done. That way it's over with and we can move on with our lives, get done all the fun stuff afterwards, you know. And I'm kind of hounding that one into them pretty hard, is to just grow up and be nice, because if they're not, then I'm not going to be to them for a little bit. They'll learn that real quick. You be nice and people will treat you nice generally.
Right.
That's nothing to do with masculine or feminine. Just be nice, you know. I guess that's my biggest thing, is just be nice.
Nice. And then Dan, for you, as you think about, you know, your kids and helping them to grow and move forward as people, you know, when we talk about this idea of that's a real man, like what does that mean to you? Like, how does that show up? So you're like, oh, that's the example right there.
Wow, that's a great question. I think there's a lot of subtlety to that. And by that, I mean, it's real hard in any short form to issue declarations or definitions, right? We're hardly the Merriam-Webster dictionary panel of experts here in this moment in time. But I would say that I was married once for 24 years, divorced for several years, been married again now for 5. And in that gap, when I was dating, I do know that what women told me they were missing. And so when I see that, it was very defining for me in a lot of ways. And when I say complementary, I definitely mean complementary energies. Because I think that if men and women make the mistake of dividing the tasks, then that can get carried all the way into childcare or the notion of the home, right? It's not above me to sweep the front porch or the kitchen, particularly if I'm the one that made the mess, right? But it's not out of line for my wife to paint the office when she looks at my calendar and realizes it's do it now or wait 3 months until I have a clear day on the calendar to contribute, right? But I do know that what I heard pretty consistently from the women that were divorced and dating, as I was in my late 40s, and you know, ages on either side of that, was that the men weren't doing enough about being what we consider very typically masculine energy, and not making decisions, not stepping in, withdrawing when the children needed additional support of some part, right? Of course, Becky's story is the extreme version of that, right? Checking all the way out of relationships. But the number of women I talked about that said that inside their marriage, they felt like, you know, married single moms, right? You know, was the way they put it. And I know one in particular, I don't know if she had a healthy dynamic, but she would test her husband to see if he would stand up to her, right? And you know, and I'm like, that's kind of extreme, and it reaches that point. And I do feel that It's biblical, of course, to live with your wife in an understanding way. But I got really bad advice early in my marriage, and a man who should have known better said to me, "If mom ain't happy, ain't nobody happy." And that theme killed my first marriage, because I was so busy trying to check with her and her preferences and the way she thought it should go. And I didn't ever practice my own voice and say, all things considered, we're going in this direction. And that doesn't mean to be inconsiderate or unresponsive to whatever needs the spouse has. But I'm super excited about the woman I'm married to now, because she gave me space to be fully masculine. This is a small example, but multiple times she makes life or death decisions all day. She's an RN. And there's multiple times we'll go to dinner, and it doesn't have to be after a shift even, and she won't even pick up the menu. I'll read the menu. I know which is inside her scope of eating healthy and tasty, and I'll order. And she likes the fact that she doesn't even have to pick up the menu.
That's beautiful. Yeah, that's you guys having a clear boundary and a clear standard with each other. Like you said, complementary. Decision fatigue. I make all these decisions all day long. I don't want to have to make this decision. I love the fact that I can trust you to pick something that I'm going to like and it's going to work for me, and I can just let go of that decision. That's a lot of trust on her part, and that's a lot of responsibility on your part. But that's like, if that's what you want, freaking ask for it, and I can show up like that. But do you want this? Do you want this? Is this okay? I'm going to give you 87. I'm going to give you 87 choices real quick for you to decide. And then I wonder why you're not happy with me, because you can't decide what the thing you want with the thing that I asked.
Right. And she gives me space, right, to have a bad day, right? Meaning, this is not some 1950s housewife dynamic, right? The trad wife thing that you hear a lot of but if I say to her, I'm feeling frustrated, right? Then she has space for that. Or I didn't like the way my day went. She has space for that. But she really appreciates that she doesn't have to hang out there and spend time.
Right. Yeah, that's fantastic. So Josh, jumping to you. I mean, to you, when we talk about being a real man, I know that's a loaded question in your world, which I love, because it is a thing we unpack on a regular basis. But to you, you've got the daughters, you've now got the son. How do you want him to turn out?
I mean, the question of like, what is a man? My only honest answer is I'll let you know as soon as I figure it out. I'm still working on it. But as far as trying to conceptualize this thing, one of the definitions we use to describe a savage gentleman is being savage enough to become self-reliant, but gentleman enough to know when to ask for help. And so there's this tension and this dichotomy of two opposing things. And listening to everyone kind of give their answers, something that came to mind, I think the chief role of the man or masculine energy is actually to acknowledge and show the intrinsic value of the feminine. It is our job as men to let the woman know that she is intrinsically valuable just for what she can do by creating life. And so everything kind of stems from that. And then, the next question, well, what about like little boys and what about other men? It is also our role as a masculine to recognize other masculine. And so, it takes a man to recognize a man. And so this is our primary function. And in order to do that, I think we have to become our authentic self. And so that's really the part of, being a man is a really important role that we have to have in our societies. And, we can get really off in the weeds of different roles and different gender assignments and all this stuff. But boiling it down, it's this energy of recognition, of defining and showing. I mean, if you go back to a biblical standpoint, like Daniel was saying, God, the Bible says that God put men on this earth to identify everything on the planet. So there's this recognition and definition and characterization that men are responsible for. And I think that's part of our creative energy, right? Versus obviously, I think a woman's creative energy is pretty apparent. She gives life and then we help define life. Is one way of looking at it. I'm not saying that's the only way or the right way, but it's, one lens or one framework that could be useful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I like the fact you kind of you're claiming the space, but you're leaving some fuzziness, because that's the real truth. Like Ogmandino once wrote, we're not human beings. We're human becomings. We are constantly learning and growing and morphing and adapting. And so the idea that, I have the best one I've got so far. It may change tomorrow. It may change in the next 10 minutes. And leaving that room, that's super important. And I definitely want to come back to that idea about between the masculine and feminine creates, masculine, we create in a different way. But we're going to take a break in about a minute for 2.5 minutes to stretch our legs, get some water, hit the head if that's what you need. And then we'll come right back. We're going to dive deeper into this idea about a boy, a man, a king. And what do men really need to be able to thrive, in the world as it is now, but really for all time? And we're going to dig into that a little bit more in just a moment. So, kind of to recap, notice we've got 4 different perspectives, 5 if you include me, different takes on what it means to be a man. There's a lot of common ground of, it's about being present. It's about being clear. It's about having integrity. It's about being able to do and show up in different ways, right? As Becky pointed out, as a husband and a father who loves kids, and as a person who needs to handle his business and deal with dangerous things. It really is. It's that both and. I love Josh's frame on savage and gentleman, because it's such a succinct way to say we got to be both. As a full expression of our humanity as men, different from feminine. Why is it in the animal world you can see clear lines between men and women, the male and the female? There's a big difference. But with human beings, why is it so messy? Why is it so complicated? Well, partly because we have choice. We have self-awareness. We get to define. We can look at something and go, that's attractive. And we can look at something else and say that's repellent. And it could be something inside ourselves, something inside society, something inside our family dynamic. We see a parent doing something that as kids, I'd never be like that, so I reject that. So the only way to make that work is I got to go this other side and be this other way. But maybe the person that was raising us had to do their own growing, and they weren't a finished product either. Maybe they were still a human becoming, and they didn't give us that awareness. They'd say, hey, I'm just figuring this out. Right? I heard a comedian yesterday say something really funny. The problem with being the firstborn child is you're being raised by 2 people who've never raised kids before. They don't know what it means to be a parent. And so it's all experimentation. It's all best guess. We don't know. And so let's take a break here, and then let's come back in about 2.5 minutes, and we're going to dive deeper. And in the comments down below, wherever you're watching, please give us thoughts, feedback, for you. I love the fact that Dan's wife came in and she said, I get decision fatigue / overload. It's nice to be able to trust him. And I think for any husband, that is a beautiful thing to hear from our wives, is that you trust us, you trust our leadership, you trust our guidance, you trust our opinion, because we work really hard for these things.
It's an honor to be able to do that. And in the field of decision making, is actually pretty low stakes.
Yeah. All right, so I think we're ready for about a 2-minute break, and then we will come back. And I'm not sure. I don't have the toggle for that. So
from right to left. and every angle in between. Know what I mean? In this day and age, so many seem like they're lost inside a world and held captive in a dream. A glimpse of mediocrity, take one for the team. And even though this path is long and this place is unforeseen, gotta keep your feet moving, filling spaces in between, seeing places in your dreams. If you complacent by your means, by all means go back to sleep. The path is steep, there's no rest for the weary. If you intend to reach peaks, it gets deep. Come on, it's infinite, we still climbing. Yes, yes, y'all. And thanks for the positive vibes, but I still got a mountain to climb. Just take it one step at a time,
I'm gonna
yo.
fall till I fall, gonna ride till I die. I'll never give in, yo, if I wanna survive. Not gonna swallow my pride, I'll never give up, cause when it's all said and done, is what I've done enough. I push myself to the edge, I push myself to the brink. Is the toil all worth it? It makes me stop and think. But through the mud and the mire, the joy and the strife, no one can claim that I didn't live all of this beautiful life.
5 years ago, the Power of We Symposium was created to provide a platform for kids from all sectors where they could have a safe and comfortable environment in which to share both their joys and concerns. The Power of We Symposium is proud to have served over 250 kids throughout Romania when we took our mission global back in May of 2023. Now, 2 teams of amazing volunteers from both the U.S. and Romania embarked on an 8-day Legacy of Hope tour, bringing encouragement and hope to not only the kids of Romania, but also the adults who support them, and also to over 100 kids here in the U.S. who contributed handwritten letters of hope to our Romania mission of 2023. Now, this year, we are proud to provide this opportunity yet again in October, and we are super excited to up our game. New venue, 750 kids this time, and we want to see you there. We're looking forward to meeting you in person at this year's event, which promises, as always, incredible speakers, amazing content, and of course, some of the greatest kids on the planet. So, mark your calendars for October 24th, and we'll see you here in Chicagoland for the Power of We Symposium 2024. This year's theme is Always Together, Never Alone. Tickets are available now on Eventbrite or at powerofwesymposium.com.
And we are back, ladies and gentlemen. So thank you for the first half, fantastic conversations and some interesting insights. And now we're starting on the second half of what it takes to help men to thrive. And we finished off the conversation talking about a little bit of that, being able to be in that space, protector, provider. Actually, Dan's wife came in at the very last second with a comment. She said, "Trust challenges me to be vulnerable." So this one's a hot button for me. We talk about vulnerability and with men. So let me ask my panel, does being vulnerable, what does that mean? And how does that make men thrive? And is there something else we could do instead? The frame of that question, I already have a suggestion, but who wants to tackle this one first?
Oh, I'm gonna shut this down right here, Jeremy. Vulnerability is a pretty common word, but I think that it has good intentions, but I think it's just maybe inaccurate for what we're trying to convey. Because the true definition of vulnerable is to expose oneself and be giving up your defense and potentially opening yourself up to harm. And there's never a good reason for doing that. There's no positive upside to vulnerability, because the only thing that's going to happen is you're going to get hurt. That being said, what we're trying to actually, I think, express with that word vulnerable is actually openness. Openness is something that is absolutely necessary. It's incredibly important and valuable. And without openness and honesty, we're really going to struggle. Now, as I think someone mentioned down here, this idea of trust, that openness has to be built upon trust. You can't just, especially for men, open up to anyone and anything. It's actually, it goes against our DNA and how we evolved, where, if you just let some, fighting age male come wandering into your tribe and you didn't ask any questions, and that it just like, oh yeah, I just assumed that they mean us no harm. And well, he said that we're fine. And you turn your back to them. That's vulnerability. That's very dangerous. Yeah, you're getting stabbed. Bad things are subject to happen. So we have evolved as men to protect and be suspicious. And it's not until I have stood shoulder to shoulder with this newfound guy, no matter what he's told me, I have to see what he's capable of to build that trust. And once that trust is built, now I can be open with him. I can open up the resources of my tribe and myself without fear of being in danger. And so I think that it's a slight distinction, and I think some people may consider that semantics, but I think that words have power and word choice is important. So personally, I don't like to use the word vulnerability at all. I much prefer openness.
Yep. I have something to go, but I know Dan already commented. Go, Dan.
Sure. I would argue that you cannot discover if somebody is trustworthy without a degree of vulnerability. If there is no openness or vulnerability on your part, then they're operating within the constraints that you've prescribed for them. Certainly, there are intelligent, thoughtful, purposeful degrees of exposure so that you can find out if people can be trusted, right? But we go through most of life, right? I mean, getting behind the wheel of a car is one of the most vulnerable things we do in America today, right? We can't wait to have everybody else on the roadway prove they're trustworthy before we get behind the wheel of a car. Nothing would ever happen, right? And so I think that's important. Now, there's emotional exhibitionism, right, which is way out of line, right? There's certainly, I think, degrees of openness, right? I think we should always be authentic. You should never have to go back and say to somebody, yeah, that wasn't me at all. I didn't mean what I said, right? There's transparent, where you let people see some of where that's coming from, but then there's ultimately vulnerability. And I think, one of Brene Brown's most accessible and foundational works is not her books. There's a 2-disc set, and it's only available as disc. It is not available in any printed format. And she discusses the fact that, she was doing all the work around women and how they struggle, with identity and shame and not living up to the images they think have been presented to themselves, and was approached by a man who said, why are you not doing work on men? This is before she started her work on men. And she said, I don't really think that's, the point. He goes, oh, it's the point. And his line was, those 3 women you see over there, his wife and 2 daughters, would rather see me die on top of my white horse than fall off of it. And he had no space for there to be any degree of vulnerability, a chance for him to say, I'm tired, a chance for him to say, I'm not sure what to do next. And that's vulnerability, because a woman or a partner or a friend could lunge at that and leverage that. But I don't, I've reached the point that I can count on my wife to not leverage that to her ends. She is there for me. And if I was never vulnerable, she would never know the depths of my confidence that she's not going to take advantage of me. It would create guardedness on her part too, is my opinion.
Right. This is and your experience. Yeah, 100%. So before I weigh in on that, Becky, JD, what do you guys think about this vulnerability thing in men?
So nobody likes to be vulnerable. Something that I read, oh God, I don't even know what book it was, that it said that part of the reason that we self-sabotage is because then we can control the outcome. And that's because we don't like being vulnerable, because we can't control anything. If we don't know what's going to happen, that scares us. And that's part of this thing with something you posted earlier about fear, right, Jeremy? You know, we either forget everything and run or face everything and rise. So, I don't know, like Josh said, standing next to somebody, there's got to be some degree of openness, maybe not vulnerability, but openness. And I've got to stand next to you, Jeremy, and Josh. Pretty good dudes. Like, they're pretty transparent. That's just how that is. So, and I mean, on an occasion like that, we all went into that not really knowing what was going to go on, just because Josh was pretty secretive about it. So we had to go into that being fairly vulnerable. Turned out to be a good thing. Fear is a good thing. Being vulnerable sometimes everything's going to work out. Maybe not exactly how you meant, but stuff will work out. So, I don't know, vulnerability, you can't avoid it. You might as well check it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then, Becky, what's your take on this? Because you've seen it through your husband, you've seen it through your son, and your daughter and your son-in-law. So you've had a lot of different frames to look at this through.
Well, so 8 years ago, my now ex-husband finally revealed to me that he was suicidal after hiding it for years and doing a darn good job. I will say the man was a consummate liar and very, very good at covering up how he felt and what he thought and stuff. We tried to get him some help. The mental health care system in this country is broken. And he spent the next 8 years. I think he was trying to get me to leave him, actually, and along that line of self-sabotage. I think that he just kept trying to prove to himself that he was unlovable and, not worthy or whatever. And he kept pushing until I finally, I couldn't take it anymore. He hit a hard line for me and proved himself right, but not easily. And so his lack of, his unwillingness to do the work on himself, to be honest with himself, and then do the recovery kind of work to heal those soul wounds, cost him everything. And it devastated me and our kids in the process. So, I think being, the idea of openness or vulnerability or something is super important. I don't think it can be overstated. I can't, as a woman in a partnership with a man who is not willing to be open and honest about, how he feels, even if he's struggling, there is no way to feel safe in that relationship either. Because if he can't take care of himself, he definitely can't protect me or our kids either. Correct. So
yeah, and this for me is what highlights like a big issue when we talk about this particular topic, vulnerability, being open, because there is the risk it can be weaponized. If a guy admits he doesn't know something, that can be used for advantage against him. So it's better to fake it till you make it. Don't say anything. Don't have any gaps. Don't have any exposures. Totally stay safe. And even the language of mental health, mental illness, it sets up this teeter-totter false dichotomy. Either you're mentally healthy or you're mentally ill. And me personally, I'm like, kill both of those terms. Turn it into mental process. Whatever you're thinking, whatever you're feeling, whatever you're going through, you're allowed to be in that space. And, how are you arriving at that thought pattern, at that feeling state inside your body? Because maybe we could do something about it. Maybe we could change the process, the association, the connection, the story. Maybe we can unpack this and we could make it become something else. And this is where the power of that word, you tell a protector or provider, which is how most men feel that's what they are. I'm here to protect. I'm here to provide, right? Like JD said, she shouldn't have to do the dangerous stuff. She can, but she shouldn't have to. That's why I'm here. That's like my biological imperative is to protect. And so you go to a protector, you go to a provider and say, you need to be vulnerable. Well, the definition of vulnerable is susceptible to physical or emotional harm or attack. So you tell a protector and a provider, hey, you need to be butt down, airbag up in the air, and that's how you need to be. No way in hell. Fighting. Like, you're not getting me that way. Not going to happen. And so because of that, just the language itself creates these momentums or these trajectories, this feeling of like, that's not happening. So what I've done is change the language to raw, real, open, and honest. And you can pick any one of those four. But what I find is if you can create the space for men to be raw with what's going on with them, to be real with what's going on, to be open about it, and to be honest about it, when a man can do that, he now claims that space inside himself. It's really hard to weaponize and use it back at him because it's like, yeah, I already said that. Well, you said you didn't know what to do. Yeah, I know. I said I'm not sure which way to take it. I see this option and this option and this option, and I'm weighing which one's the best way to go. Well, you just don't know, do you? No, I don't, because it's a big, important thing. It's complicated and messy. I'm at the limit of my resourcefulness. I'm going to bring some more people into the conversation to get some better ideas. When you can own the reality of the situation, that's it, because I already owned that. And so what? I already said that. Look, I have a hand. You're telling me the same crap. I already told you that. And so it takes back the power to be vulnerable, to be manipulated, to be attacked for not having X or Y or Z. Yeah, I already said that. I already said I need to work on that. I already said that's an area of growth for me. And so in my world, that's a big piece of how we start to change the language and change the impact, because there's what's really going on, which is the feeling and the state that we're in at this moment. And then there's what's truly happening, which is maybe those bigger metaphysical issues or existential issues of maybe this is an opportunity for me to grow and become more than I have been up to this point. Right? When someone says, oh, I'm thinking about getting a divorce, I'm like, cool. From the situation or from the person? Because you can divorce your past way of relating to your partner without divorcing the person. Because the person, oh, they challenged me and they're making me grow and making me uncomfortable. Fantastic. Let's go into that and learn from it and expand. Versus you cut that person off, you cut off that opportunity for growth. So it's playing with language can really open up. And so it's like, okay, we want men to be open and we want men to be available. We want them to be present. We want them to speak with integrity. Then we got to make it safe for them to do that and to make mistakes, because that's sometimes how we learn. Is that, how does that jive with all of you?
I mean, essentially what you're describing here, it's something that you and I, we've talked about quite a bit, but it's all in the storytelling. The stories that we tell about ourselves, about the situations, kind of create our reality. And there are some words that, for whatever reason, right, wrong, or whatever, are difficult to get past because they have certain connotations and they tell maybe a different story than what someone wants to believe or the story that they want to experience. And so this is where, Daniel, like, he has no issue with vulnerability. That's, it's a word that he likes, and I like his progression. And I think we're ultimately arriving at the same destination. But for a lot of guys, that word is a huge hang up. And so it's like, okay, let's replace the word. The concept is the same. But, I think for most men, the framework is like, of course you have to open the gates to the castle to get resources in and out. And that's openness. Like, you're not going to survive without that openness. But for a lot of men, I think the idea of vulnerability is not only opening the gates, but you send all of your soldiers out naked and unarmed. And, you've just emptied all of your ability to protect. And so, again, not to say that that's right, wrong, or whatever, but I think that is the framework that a lot of men see that from. And when you run into that, then all of a sudden that word for them isn't useful. And so we've got to develop language to develop the story a little bit better. And so, that's kind of what you're talking about, Jeremy, is rewriting the story, changing the narrative, or as you like to say, belief system around a certain thing, and that will in effect change our reality and change our experience.
100%. So now, how do we use this? How do we help men thrive? How do we make this a space where men can be as real as they want, right? I've got a great quote from Douglas Adams talking about the ancient galactic empire. It was a time when men were real men, women were real women, and small furry creatures from Alpha Centauri were real small furry creatures from Alpha Centauri. And it's like, that doesn't help us. So what can we do to help the people around us thrive? How can we help the men in our lives thrive? Especially, we're coming down to Father's Day. What are the things we can do as families, as friends? Dude, you freaking rock. Like, for me personally, the fact that I get to introduce the four of you and say, hey, these are some cool people that you should go talk to and you should have in your network and have in your community and have in your brain trust. That's one of my favorite things. I love connecting people together that are like, you're really cool and you're really cool. And I think the two of you together might find something really cool. And that's something I see a lot in Dan, because that's part of his professional, frame and the work he does. But it's really that authentic connection is such a powerful thing. How often do people get appreciated? Right? In your experience, for the four of you, how often are you hearing, hey, that meant a lot to me. That was really helpful. That was really powerful.
Frequently, but not frequently enough. And what I mean by that is, I think I have a sphere of friends, both men and women. And I think women are a little more quick to say, that meant a lot to me, or I appreciate the uplift. I have a few men that will say that, particularly those that I've been with through some rough spots in their life, and they don't have anything to lose by saying I was in a low spot and that meant a lot to me. And I happen to be fortunate enough to have access to some data. There's plenty, I'm sure, that backs us up. But about 15 years ago, I spent a big chunk of my life, closer to 20 now, hanging out with a bunch of students that were getting Masters of Divinity at Covenant Theological in St. Louis. And the backstory of how I ended up hanging out in that community is not that important. But I was auditing some classes in real time. And one of those produced, one of the students produced a, whatever you have to do for your master's degree, what do they call it? Thesis, right? Master's thesis. And it was, why do some pastors last forever and some pastors burn out? And the research that student did alongside the professor that was the advisor showed that it is having men that they can be vulnerable or transparent or authentic with, meaning too often a pastor finds themselves surrounded by the men in their church, and they can't go to the men in their church and say, I've got a porn issue. They can't go to the men in their church usually and say, our finances are wrecked. They can't go to the men in their church and say, my wife and I'm not sure we're going to make it. I mean, I think we can, but right now it doesn't feel like we can. And they literally have to have someone that they can be accessible to and maybe even accountable to without the role of being the leader. They absolutely have to have peers. And I think the degree to which we can build peers in our life who can call us out, right? I mean, I made some mistakes in my first marriage, and I have friends, ones that are vulnerable with me and that I've supported through some weird places in their lives, that have said to me, for the record, if you make the same mistakes in your second marriage that you make in your first, I'll be the first to see it. I'll be the first to kick your ass.
Nice.
Right.
Those are real friends.
They're not, they're yeah. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's something I see is, go ahead. Or was that?
Oh, I was to say that resonates. I wish that my ex-husband had friends like that instead of friends that would encourage him to continue to drink and encourage him to continue to tune out. I mean, to me, that wasn't a friend. I was begging his friends for help. And They just were more interested in having him drink with them than anything else. So I completely concur with the idea of peers that will hold you accountable and also support you in the process of life.
Yeah. Yeah. The challenge I see for a lot of men is, especially business owner dads, men who are, leaders in some sort of way, shape, or form, they cannot go to the people inside their power structure for like mental and moral support or impact or clarity or whatever, because that power structure, the leader of the organization, is feeling unstable. What about us? And now their needs and fears and doubts get put into the very human part of the leader of the organization, or the leader of the community, the leader of the family, leader of the whatever, right? It's like, if me as a leader, I've got two parts. There's this wisdom part of me that's plugged into all this knowledge and experience and all the rest. And then in my family, I'm just dad, right? And I'm not all these other accolades and all these other experiences. My kids don't know any of that stuff from birth. They just know, hey, there's this guy who shows up and like does stuff at night when I'm scared and calms me down and helps me sleep. And so because of that, we as humans still have that human process that we're experiencing, and we need to get it out. We need to work through it. But if we go to our kids and be like, hey kid, I'm struggling with this thing, what do you think? But yet in a work situation, CEO, you can't go to some mid-level person, mid-level manager, some rank and file employee and just like unburden yourself, because then that becomes a burden to them, because they're not at the same life experience, the same framework to appreciate it. So you're running through something and you're talking to somebody who's down here. Now they're worried about their livelihood. Well, he's the CEO and he's freaking out. What's that mean for me? Do I have a job? Should I be putting out resumes? And so we need that community outside of our daily life so that we do have those accountabilities and that brain trust to speak to. Right. And I see Josh kind of.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, you're good.
Well, what you're describing here is essentially a tribe, right? And within a tribe, there are different roles that people play. And even if you're the chief of the tribe, you're going to have elders that you also appeal to, right? You're going to have other people, you're going to have peers that can support you in certain ways. And I think that that's something that is kind of missing in our society today, is even though we are very tribal by nature, we're so disconnected. We don't really have this tribe where we can confide in someone without worrying about how much fear we're going to instill in them because of whatever reason. And just recently on our last Legion event, I came across this, and I call it the kid brother effect, right? Where at this event, everybody got a chance to be kind of the kid brother in one thing or the other. And, obviously when men hear that, they're like, man, I don't want to be that. Like, no one wants to be the kid brother. But in the same way, like, you want a circle of people where you get to be the kid brother in one facet or another. And then you change, modalities, you change activities, and now all of a sudden you're the big brother and you're helping your other little brother along, right? The feeling of like, oh, hey guys, I'm just here doing my best. I'm trying really hard. Is I think hard for a lot of men to swallow. But if you look at it as a kid brother, like, big brother is happy to bring you along with, even though you're not good, even though they have to take care of you and help you out in this moment, like, they're happy that you're there. They're happy that you're learning. And then the beauty of that is you don't have to stay kid brother. You have your own skills and unique attributes that when, we go from survival skills and building fires and you don't know what you're doing to now we're doing hand-to-hand combat and you're a kung fu master like Jeremy Roadruck. Now all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm in my wheelhouse and I get to help these guys out the same way they helped me. And I think that is the value of a tribe and why it's so essential that we have one. And it's so tragic that for a lot of people, we don't, if they don't have one. And so, that to that, I would say that, even though you don't have that tribe to recognize you, which is, if you're ever in doubt as to what you value you bring, you can kind of look around and see the people who are connected to you, and they validate that. The fact that you are surrounded by these people should be enough indication that, like, yes, I matter, I'm important, because you look at them and you see their value, and their presence reflects that value back to you. And to the folks that maybe don't feel like they have anyone, and I know that there's guys out there that feel lost and they feel alone, I would say that you just haven't found them yet. But your proof of your inherent intrinsic value is the fact that you woke up today, that you're still living and breathing, that you exist should be enough validation for who and what you are. And as soon as you recognize that, as soon as you realize that for yourself, I think that you're going to find that tribe. I know I have. As soon as I started to recognize my own inherent value just by existing, by the fact that I am here, people started finding me, the right people that I needed. And so, you know, it's a chicken and egg, horse cart conundrum, I think, but it really starts with that recognized value. And once you see it for yourself, more and more people will also start to see it. And you can start reflecting their value back to them. And it just continues to circle round and round.
Yeah. And that's, as you're talking, I'm thinking about, you know, the thing that I think a lot of fathers need to hear is just that. It's, you mean so much to me, and you mean so much in this way, because we don't know. We're just showing up, doing the best we know how with what's in our wheelhouse. And is this stuff anything? Does it have any value? Does it any? I don't know. I got to go do more stuff. So like, I'm just going to go do the next thing. And for a lot of guys, we don't get the chance to pause, breathe, and go, oh, that meant a lot to you. Oh. And it's like, well, you know, I see the thing. It's like, well, what do you want for Father's Day? The standard dad answer: nothing. I'm good. If I need it, I'll go get it. It's fine. I don't need anything. Can I have some peace? Right? It's like, what do we really want? How about to know the impact of our life on the people that love us, or the people that we love, and say, hey, you know, this is what stands out for me. This is the greatest example I've seen from you thus far in my life. Like, maybe those are the lessons and the information we need to hear. And then it's getting ourselves, like we just said, surrounded by a community that we can grow with and move forward with. Because I know a lot of guys that feel isolated, they feel alone, they feel like they're carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders, and they don't have places they can trust. They don't have places they can be open or raw or real or anything. And so they shut up, and they do the work in front of them, and they don't know why they wake up in the morning. And it doesn't have to be that way. And so I really appreciate the four of you taking your time, and everyone who's watching along. It's been, you know, almost an hour and a half. We're at an hour and 22 minutes. But as we're coming down to the final thoughts, from each of you, just a 1 minute, what's the biggest thing you're taking away from this conversation to apply this month? We're talking about fathers and men. But what are you going to take forward from today? 1 minute. What do you got?
I'll go. I don't know. I know I'm going to try and be more vulnerable, just because that helps boys. And that's talking about what lets us know that we're doing the right thing is, as you were just talking about, but when you're telling your kids something and it feels like you're talking to a brick wall, but, you know, 3 weeks later, they actually do what you were telling them, even though the lights were off, nobody was home when you were telling them. That's kind of reassuring to know that, okay, yeah, just because it feels like there's a brick wall that I'm talking to, they were actually paying attention and they did listen, and that maybe something that I said got through, and that they're still learning.
I love that.
Something that I've had to tell my kids is, like you said, you know, the first kid, they're getting raised by somebody that doesn't know how to raise a kid. And I read something before that said that when we're growing up, we don't realize that we're watching our parents grow up too. Well, now that I'm old enough and have kids, God dang, that's such a true statement, because there's curveballs every day. But like I said, just knowing that if I'm vulnerable, they'll open up more with me, and knowing that they're going to actually listen is pretty cool. So
Nice. I like that. Thank you. Becky, what are you going to carry forward from today?
What am I going to carry forward? Well, I don't know. You know, I mean, my father has been gone for 4 years, and my kid's dad is not in the picture at all. I don't have any grandchildren yet, so no son or son-in-law being a father or anything. But I think what I would say to those of you that have young kids, learn about the nervous system and how the nervous system works and how to regulate a dysregulated nervous system. That was transformative in my parenting for all of my kids. And in particular, I think, you know, with boys who are less verbally inclined, you know, than girls tend to be, it helps.
Very nice. Dan?
I think a couple things. The awareness, you know, that everybody's got a different perspective. I love that Josh emphasized that language matters, right? So it's not just enough to be precise in your language. You have to make sure people are clear on your definitions on that. Because I do think he and I were closer together, you know, than the use of language would have indicated, you know, right off the top. So yeah, an awareness of other perspectives, and even if we all agree on the fundamentals, you know, there's some fuzziness around the edges that comes from the way we experience life, right, in a lot of ways. And so I think that's part of it. And then part of it is paying attention to the way we model what's right for our kids, right? I'm not going to have time to break the story down, but I am the adopted father of a woman who's 36 now, and I only adopted her about 3 years ago. It's a legal adoption. And so my fatherhood came late, and, you know, I'm engaging with the wonderful person she was when I met her, and yet still trying to help her heal from some damage, you know, in her past, and why she doesn't have a father in her past. And it's a beautiful thing, but it's a constant reminder. I mean, hearing y'all talk is a reminder that I need to be talking with her, because I don't have the years to model what a good husband would look like. Talking to her about what a good husband, you know, is in her mind, and what I've seen makes good and bad husbands. So I appreciate the reminder.
And Josh, bring us home.
For me, the biggest theme and the thing that I want to, for myself, continue to carry forward and encourage others to bring forward as well, is this idea of trust. And that really, the foundation of that begins with ourselves. We have to learn to trust ourselves. If you cannot trust yourself, then you really can't trust anyone. And so then you can't be open, you can't be raw, vulnerable, however you want to describe that. And a big part of that trust comes from knowing yourself. You can't trust what you don't know. And so that, by extension, to know something, to really truly understand it fundamentally, then you have to love it, right? And so this trust goes to knowing, goes to love, and then it feeds right back up again and outward. And I think for the men out there, if you're experiencing some trust issues in your circumstances, then I would encourage you to start looking inward, and recognizing where you aren't trusting yourself. And if you're not, then really start being introspective and getting to know yourself. And in that process, you will learn to love and learn to trust. And that will magnify outward in all directions in all your relationships, and potentially bring in the things that whatever it is that you're missing. Or maybe you're not missing them, you're just not seeing them. They could be already there. We're often waiting for the verbal cue from someone to tell us. And man, it really does mean a lot hearing something from somebody that you respect or you love or you care for. Those words are valuable, but sometimes actions speak louder. And sometimes we're looking for one thing and we're missing the other thing. And so as we dive deeper into ourselves and understanding, we can start to see that, hey, maybe that thing was here all along. I just missed it for whatever reason. And so encourage guys to understand that man, you're not, there's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. There's nothing there to fix. It's just recognizing what's always been there and realizing that, you know, who you were created to be. That would be the thing that I'd like to leave with for myself and for everyone else, because that's still a process. I'm still working on that daily in my own life.
100%. And, you know, so as we come down to the final seconds, I want to just leave you with the biggest thing. Get community, get people around you. A lone wolf will die of exposure because you cannot have every single strength all within yourself and need nothing from nowhere. We are a social species. We are designed to be in community, whatever context, right? It doesn't have to be a religious community, but we are designed to be around other people. They cover our weaknesses, we cover their weaknesses, and everyone gets amplified. I have a community, Josh has a community. Definitely come and check those out. If you're looking in the business side, Dan is part of several communities as well. Do not try to do this thing we call life in isolation, because you're only going to get so far before you are exhausted and you're just churned up and spit out. Everybody has a bad day. Everybody has a bad week. Everybody has a bad moment. And having people that are genuine, people you can trust, who are going to show up for you, step up with you, step into the situations, that's not going to happen in isolation. You have to get into the world. We are independent as people, but we are interdependent as a society, as a species. So you got to do your work 100%, but you don't have to do it all by yourself. Don't tell me I invented fire and now I'm inventing the wheel. It's a square. You're going to have problems. So we could save time by leveraging each other's intelligences. So I want to thank everybody who made the time today to join us online. I'd love to thank everybody here in the room virtually. And I'd like to thank Dr. Loren for giving us this opportunity to utilize his platform, share an important conversation. And I would love to know, whether you watch live or you watch the replays, leave comments down below. What were the nuggets you took away? Because I'm going to be looking at the commentary for how to help serve men, serve dads, serve business owners to improve their quality of life, to get more in life, love, and business. Because life is too short for bad food and life is too short for bad marriages. Well, let's make life better by playing with it. And with that being said, we are done for the time. And I want to thank Dr. Loren for everything. You've been such a great advocate and ally and friend. You are a fantastic person, and everybody, great moves that he's making in lots of places. And